welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, I've just walked in the door from having been to see the new movie Logan, and man, it's a really, really good film. Until Logan came out, I think there were three what I would call genre-defying superhero movies. These were films that were superhero fantasy films, but because of the quality and the fact that they really did defy the genre, they elevated the superhero movie into something else very special altogether. Those three films were Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight, M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable, and the Russo brothers' Captain America Winter Soldier. Three films that I think would just stand out, and really they stand out because they're more than just superhero fantasy films. Well, Logan can be now added to that stable. It's the fourth film in that stable of genre-defying superhero movies. And the reason it's genre-defying is it's not really a superhero movie. So people saying this is the best superhero movie I've ever seen, it's not really a superhero movie. In fact, this is a Western. Now, I'm not going to unpack all of the ways in which this is a Western because that would be a review that was full of spoilers, and I've promised you a spoiler-free review, and there's lots of people who haven't seen the movie yet, but this is a Western, really, with superhero elements in it, and it's really, really well made. In order to prepare for this film, in the last couple of days I watched The Wolverine, which was, again, James Mangold, same director. He didn't write The Wolverine, though, whereas he did write this one, Logan. And I watched The Wolverine because it does lead into it. You don't have to have watched The Wolverine to go and watch Logan. In fact, you don't even need to have seen any of the X-Men films. It would probably help to know a little bit of the basic premise about the X-Men, but even if you didn't know that, you would still walk away from this movie having a very enjoyable and rewarding movie experience. But I watched The Wolverine, and I didn't watch it at the time it came out because I'd heard a lot of bad negative reviews about it. I'd heard that people were saying it just wasn't a good film. Well, I'm really surprised by that because it is actually a good movie. It is, once again, I think because of the fact that The Wolverine is also a superhero genre-defying sort of film, it wasn't as appreciated as much as it could have been. This is more of a samurai western, The Wolverine. It's set in, most of it takes place in Japan. There is a whole, look, if you've watched samurai films before, particularly those sort of samurai spaghetti western style films, then you'll recognise a lot. There's some great fight scenes. It's very cleverly crafted. It's trying to do a lot of what Logan does, but Logan does a lot of the same things a lot better. So there is serious dramatic moments in The Wolverine where Logan is trying to get to grips with who he is and what his place is in the world, and responsibility for the damage that he's done to other people's lives. But so it touches on some very serious themes, but Logan does that even better. The other thing about The Wolverine is that there's a great sense of how would you put it? It was a movie that was trying to do more than just be a superhero film. Like I said, it was genre defying. Logan really, really pulls that off. The Wolverine gets it mostly right, but there are some little flaws and hiccups in there as well. I think the biggest thing that The Wolverine suffered from was it was released probably a couple of years too early. It came out right at that peak of the MCU. Marvel Cinematic Universe was really at its peak, and it had locked basically us into a very narrow view of what a superhero film should or could be. And so people were effectively looking for Avengers type films. And The Wolverine is definitely not an Avengers type superhero movie, and I think that's why it didn't get the critical acclaim that it really does deserve. Like I said, it's not as good as Logan, but it's a pretty good film. I think if The Wolverine had been released now, it might have been a different story, because we've had, a few other films that have, and also the Marvel Cinematic Universe has started to, I think, wane a little bit. There's no doubt that there is a bit of Marvel fatigue going on, and Captain America Civil War was not as great as it was promised it was going to be. It was a bit of a, rinse, wash, repeat type cycle. So I think if it had come out now, The Wolverine probably would have got a lot more critical acclaim. But Logan is even better. It's a really good movie. There is the direction is really good. It's really well crafted. It handles some of those same very typical X-Men themes, but it does them with subtlety and with excellence. I found that the way previous films had handled them, the Bryan Singer outings, it was just like being hit over the head with a concrete bat. There was no subtlety in it. It was just political and ideological, whereas this film goes to the deeper themes. It really touches on the themes, and that's why this will be a timeless movie. You'll be able to watch this movie in 10 or 15 or 20 years, which is kind of ironic because there's actually a scene in this film, I won't tell you what it is, where they are watching a particular movie that is almost 100 years old, and at the time this movie takes place. And so there is a bit of irony in that, and I don't know whether it was intentional, but I think that's definitely going to be the same sort of commentary for this film, because this film, as I said, really it's an excellently and well-crafted movie, and it happens to have superhero elements in it, and so it will be timeless because of that. And it'll be timeless because it's not grounded itself in any sort of current political situation or ideological situation. It's not trying to preach at you. It's not trying to throw propaganda at you. And this is a movie that, when you really think about it, at certain points it should have crumbled under its own weight, because particularly in the final act of the movie, we do get some of those same concepts that we've had in previous X-Men and Wolverine movies coming out in this film. But when they've been done previously, they just haven't been handled well. This movie really gets it right. And there are a couple of moments where this film should have crumbled under its own weight. It should have almost been like one of the Bourne sequels, where you were revisiting the same old territory and it was just starting to get tired and probably cheesy as well. But this film, it manages to actually keep everything fresh and do it all well. And there is a lot of violence, or more violence than you've seen in any other previous X-Men film, that's for sure. There's a lot more swearing than any other previous X-Men film. This is not a film you take your children to. But it is a film that I think explores some profoundly important issues. All sorts of things are touched on in this movie in a way that's some really, really beautiful stuff. I actually had tears in my eyes at a couple of points in this film. Again, I won't spoil it for you. This is definitely Hugh Jackman's best outing as Wolverine in any of the films. It's definitely the best X-Men movie that's ever been put to screen, that's for sure. The young girl in this film, great acting. She hasn't got a lot of speaking, but her acting is really good, and that was one part where the whole thing could have fallen down, but she just gets it right, and it works quite well. There's also some very, very powerful acting and some really emotionally touching scenes from Patrick Stewart as an aging Professor X. It's I'm not going to say anymore. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but he really opens up some profound themes around the treatment of the elderly, particularly in their declining years in this movie. And man, he just pulls you into it in such a beautiful way. It's just so well directed and acted. There is also some really great acting from Stephen Merchant, who, maybe some of you aren't familiar with Stephen Merchant. He co-wrote and he starred in a couple of scenes in the British version of The Office. He co-wrote it with Ricky Gervais. You will probably know him as more of a light-hearted comedic actor, but he plays a serious role in this movie, and he's got some really good acting chops. And once again, his role, he's only briefly in this film, but early on he has a bit more substantial speaking parts. And what he delivers is, once again, it really gets to some profoundly important themes about the human condition and about the human experience. There's a lot to like about this movie. Like I said, it is an R-rated film though, so you have to go into it with your eyes open. You are going to see more blood and gore than you've seen in previous films. It wasn't as over the top as what I expected though. I'd sort of heard stories about, there was blood and guts everywhere. The action scenes have definitely got more gore, but it still doesn't feel as visceral as, say, is it Rambo 5 or Rambo 4, some of those other films where there've just been blood and guts everywhere. It still somehow felt measured. But don't get me wrong, there's a lot more violence in this than there is in other superhero films. And there's more graphic violence scenes that you'll see. There's also a lot more swearing in this, and it's got an R rating for a reason. But like I said, this is really a Western, and it's a very good Western about a desperate and disparate band of people who are on the run from this great evil. It also touches on some really interesting themes around how the establishment, whether that be the corporations or the military or the government, is having an impact on the lives of ordinary everyday people. It almost feels like it's a movie about the working classes, interestingly enough, which once again, it's not really something you expect from a superhero film. The only other thing I've seen that's probably come close to this would be Unbreakable, which, about a guy who's just working an ordinary 9-to-5 job, trying to make his way in the world and is trying to make sense of his own life. But it's a great film. If you are a fan of the X-Men, I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy this movie. If you're not a fan of the X-Men, I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy this film. If you're someone who doesn't like too much swearing and too much violence in their movies, then maybe you might want to give it a miss. But otherwise, this is a really, really, really good film. It's definitely the best X-Men film, and it's definitely by a country mile the best X-Men film. It's by a country mile also the best Logan film that's ever been made. It really does put the others to shame. The only one that comes close is the Wolverine, and I think that it's probably something that's deserving of a second watching, because it actually starts to touch on some of the themes that this movie really expounds on and does great justice to. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.